Hey, day drinkers at night drinkers, or Thursday in quarantine, every night in quarantine. It's gotten messy. I'm not gonna lie. I'm so glad to see you. We took a great break. I hope you had a good break. It feels like our days are really running together. I mean, every day is sort of the same, and so they all feel the same, and they're just like weeks go by, and I have no idea, what has happened. But we had a really good break over the Easter weekend, and I hope you did too. My guest tonight is Marissa Stapley. Oh my gosh, I should find that. But she's here to talk about her amazing book, Lucky. And because my mom always likes it, I'm going to read you the back cover copy. Actually, I was really tempted with this one to just read the tagline because, it's the best tagline. I mean, if you don't want to pick up this book because of the tagline, you might be dead inside. So the book is called Lucky. Here's the tagline. What if you had the winning ticket that could change your life forever, but you couldn't cash it in? Lucky Armstrong is a tough, talented grifter who has just pulled off $1 million heist with her boyfriend, Carrie. She's ready to start a brand new life with a new identity when things go sideways. Lucky finds herself alone for the first time, navigating the world without the help of either her father or her boyfriend, the two figures from whom she's learned the art of the scam. When she discovers that a lottery ticket she bought on a whim is worth millions, her elation is tempered by one big problem. Cashing in the winning ticket means the police will arrest her for her crimes. She'll go to prison with no chance to redeem her fortune. As Lucky tries to avoid arrest and make a future for herself, she must confront her past by reconciling with her father, finding her mother who abandoned her when she was just a baby, and coming to terms with the man she thought she loved, whose complicated past is catching up to her too. This is a novel about truth, personal redemption, and the complexity of being good. It introduces a singularly gifted, complicated character who must learn what it means to be independent and honest before her luck runs out. And here's the author, Marissa.
Hello.
Hello.
That sounds
good. Hey, you wrote that book. Copy editors really, really earn their keep on really good back cover copy, don't they?
Yeah. Yes. But about the tagline, that was always there was always a good, actually, when they say you should have an elevator pitch for your novel. So I've never ever had that. And I get confused and lost and it's meandering and then people's faces go funny and it's horrible. And I was determined to finally come up with a novel so people would say, what are you working on? I'd be like, I'm working on an article about a con artist with a heart of gold and a winning lottery ticket she can't cash in her back pocket. And they were like, whoa, that sounds good. I'm like, yes. And I just walk away and
drop the mic.
Elevator opens and I'm done.
You don't even have to write the book. It is. I've had very few books where I've been able to nail an elevator pitch. It is so hard, and it's one of those things as a writer that I'm like, is it really important? Do I mean, why don't I just write a great book and then? But the times that I have had it, I mean, it really does make a difference. I write that tagline everywhere. It's at the top of the book.
I think the book, it doesn't really make a difference to the book, but it makes a difference to you because you never have to have that moment of, what am I even talking about? What is this? What is this book about? When the person's face, their eyes glaze over. That.
Well, see, it's a dual timeline about secrets kept. In 19.
Trust me.
This is, I think, the first time in all of my year-long drinking that we actually have a cocktail that has been created specifically for your book.
Nice.
I mean,
there it is.
If that's not big time, I don't know what is.
Mine's this has extra grapefruit juice because I was doing an event and I was thirsty. So I had half of it and then I added grapefruit juice in the kitchen. But yes, this was created by a cocktail bar in Toronto called Famous Last Words in the West End. And if you live in Toronto and if you haven't been to this bar and if you're a book lover, you absolutely, of course, when we get out of this next this pickle we're in, we've this corner we've been painted into, I would absolutely go to Famous Last Words. It's a literary cocktail bar, and every drink is named after a book. My favorite is the Everyone Brave is Forgiven, which is named after the amazing Chris Cleave novel. And it's a gin-based cocktail. And this is the Lucky that Marlene created for me. And it has sparkling wine because there is champagne in the book. It has gin, a little bit of elderflower liqueur, and a sprig of
Simple
thyme.
syrup and a little thyme.
And simple syrup and fresh grapefruit juice. So it's really good.
It is very
I've been
refreshing.
drinking them all week. Mm-hmm.
I will make a confession. We're back for those of you who may not be in Ontario, we're back in serious lockdown, and I had not made a liquor run in a while. And I thought, certainly I have gin, but then I didn't have gin.
Oh,
so
no.
I'm drinking tequila.
I thought that looked like a margarita. It looks pretty good. Listen,
Right.
you're resilient. You're like Lucky. You're just rolling with the
Yeah, right. Rolling with it. That was a grapefruit seed. This book, there are, as I read that back cover copy, and as we talked about the tagline, when you read this book, there are, like, what was the germ of the idea? Like, what was the beginning of this idea? Because there could have been like a con woman on the run. I mean, there's a lot of different points of entry to this idea. Did it start with the lottery ticket and you had to build around that? What came first?
So the idea came to me. I was listening to the radio, and all of a sudden it was like an American station my husband was listening to, and it was maybe a morning show. It's almost like it was magic, because I don't remember what it was. I don't remember why these guys were talking about this North Carolina winning lottery ticket worth the biggest payout in state history, lottery history. 2 days left or something, about to expire, hadn't been claimed. So they talked about that, and then they were saying, sometimes these tickets don't go, they do go unclaimed, and there are various reasons. Sometimes it comes to light that the person who bought the ticket has died. Sometimes they don't know they had it. I mean, there was someone in Ontario, I think, who had a lottery ticket that was worth $1 million and only found it after it had already expired. Can you imagine?
No.
I know. And this was kind of, they were like, oh my God. And then the guy was like, sometimes people have a warrant out for their arrest and they can't come forward. And I was like, oh, really? Like, that is, my author senses were tingling. And I just thought, I love that. That there's so much story there. So I just immediately was trying to think of a character, but I kept sort of coming up with these seedy criminal types, and it just felt like, I don't want to read about like someone who's done something awful and then they can't cash in their lottery ticket because we won't want them to.
Right.
But for some reason, and I feel like you feel the same, because everybody loves like a good con artist caper, or like a good like knocking over a casino like Ocean's 11, or
right.
Like, it just, even though it's technically bad, we just love sort of seeing these Robin Hood type characters getting away with their grifting. So right. That I realized, okay, I can have a con artist who's sort of got some Robin Hood in her, and people will want her to be able to redeem this ticket and herself, and therefore they will follow her anywhere.
Yeah. And it was, I was wondering as you were writing it, because she is a criminal and she is on the run, and she did rob some people of money. As things sort of go on in the novel, it's, there's a lot more pinned on her than she actually did. But was that a tricky part, like making her redeemable and making her, I don't want to say, I mean, she was very sympathetic, but was that a tricky part? Did you kind of keep having to pull back on the things that she had done or what she would do to survive, that kind of stuff?
It wasn't, because I started the novel and it was probably tricky for the first like couple of days. And then all of a sudden, that opening scene came to me where she was left on the church steps and picked up off the church steps by a grifter. And then those childhood chapters, like, it wasn't always going to be this dual timeline. But as soon as I introduced Lucky as a child, we instantly felt sympathetic, because we saw her as a child. We saw how little control she had as a child over what was happening to her. And because we were going back and forth between, okay, yeah, her in the present, maybe making some questionable choices, maybe being a criminal, but also, look where she came from. She really didn't have any choice. And then as she gets choice in the book, she chooses, not always, but like enough to make it interesting.
A good try.
Like, it's not boring, but like she's ultimately, she does have a heart of gold, slightly tarnished gold. So you don't hate yourself for loving her. And I needed that. I don't want that anymore. Like, I don't want to be like, oh, this person is awful, but like, I'm kind of into it, like in House of Cards or whatever, and then later it turns out the actor actually is a terrible person. Then you hate yourself a million times more, right? Like, I just wanted like to love her. I wanted people to feel good for the most part.
The dual timeline. So this is it is a story for those of you who haven't read it. And if you have read it and you have questions or thoughts or ideas about it, please post a comment. I've gotten pretty good at paying attention to the comments on the side. But so it wasn't initially going to be a dual timeline. So when did that happen in your process? Because it does create so much sympathy. I mean, this woman, she was a kid who couldn't get to school. She, her dad kept her completely under control. So when did the dual timeline idea start to happen for you?
Yeah, I think it was pretty early. Like, I can't exactly pinpoint it, but the way that I do write novels now is rather than outlining from the beginning, I'll just dive right in, do a super messy, very, very short first draft, let's say around 40,000 words, like maybe, and then go back into that first draft and outline from there. So it was probably pretty early in that messy first draft situation where I was just like feeling my way around blindly, and I think that style of doing it means I can find that, we've got to do this dual timeline. And all of a sudden I'll just start writing that scene. Here she is on the church steps, and there's no pressure on me at all. And I find that really fun, because it was really the only way that I could keep my writing feeling like fun and not like a total slog, was just to allow myself this creative burst and be all, precious about it in my own, on my own time, and then figure it all out and send it to my editor. So it was pretty early on then. And I remember I was sitting in my living room writing, and my kids were there, probably like playing Roblox. And I was like, listen, I want to read you these opening pages. Like, is this interesting? Like, is this anything? And both of my kids were pretty into it. So I knew right then, like, okay, I have something here. This dual timeline is gonna save us all.
You read your parts of your book to your children
at once. It's not like we're like, I did it one time.
I'm trying right now to imagine saying, hey, Mick, my 15-year-old, Mick, I'm just going to read you a little stuff. And he'd be like, no. So another like really fun trick in this book, I mean, as I read it, I was like, there were a lot of points that I was like, oh man, you just kept making it harder and harder for yourself as a writer. And the other thing is that you have 2 road trips. Like, there's a road trip in the past with Lucky and her father, and then you have this road trip in the present where Lucky is trying to figure out where she can go to be safe. Like, and one road trip is tricky. To write and to keep interesting and not like bogged down by like, and then they stop for gas. Like, so how did you approach that?
Well, okay, so most of my novels have had multiple characters. So to be honest with you, this was pretty easy for me. I mean, Mating for Life had 4 characters plus like all these side characters, and there really wasn't even a main character. Things to Do When It's Raining had 3. I saw really 3 main characters, but I suppose it was centering around one character, but you got the perspective of 2 others. And then The Last Resort, I don't even know. I mean, there were at least 3. Like, I forget. It's just, so Lucky was just Lucky. Like, I only had to worry about Lucky. So it didn't matter. The dual timeline and the road trips were fairly easy for me to keep track of because it was just her. I didn't have to worry about how anybody else was feeling.
Wow.
until, the moment we were talking about, but let's not. So, that I think, and I do rigorously outline in retrospect. So I might just be all like freewheeling in that messy first draft, but then I go in and I'm like, okay, this is going to happen. Like I've got to really get this into shape so we know with fairly
That's
good.
a really interesting process. So you dive in on a first draft that's fairly short, and then you go back in and and then you start sort of creating your book from there. How much of it do you throw out? Like I would think there's a lot of stuff you don't use.
Well, and I try not to do that. I know. Well, I mean, honestly, like it's a lot of like, okay, now she needs to get to Seattle, but like no idea. We'll figure it out. Like we being like my my friend in my head.
Right. I know that one.
bud. So yeah, I think it's a lot of TK, like that whole, the old journalism trick that this is to come. Do you know about how that's like no in the English language and TK doesn't appear in any word? So if you put a TK in your manuscript and then do a search, it will only come up as these little placeholders. So really, this is a trick you need to do. So when you don't know, just put TK and then you can do searches for.
I put like 5 question points and like squares.
So, but I would say not a lot of it is getting thrown away. It's more just there's not really a ton there. I mean, and I'm writing some scenes and I'm sort of just, but a lot of it is like, I'll start writing a scene and then by the end of it, I'm like, I don't know, this is not working, but it should be like this, figure this out.
Right.
And then I'll just go, because I think that's a huge obstacle for writers, isn't it? Like trying to get past your self-consciousness and get that first draft done.
Ugh.
It's hard. And I know for Karma Brown, who's my friend and we write rom-coms together now, but it drives her crazy. And she's like, that's not a first draft. I'm like, but it doesn't really matter because it's really just for me. And she's like, it's all itchy, like seriously, almost hives. Like she's so precise. And she's like, you just put a bunch of TKs and I'm like, yes, I do. And I'm just like, woohoo, like I'm driving this thing. But it's fun for me because I had this experience years ago with Ian Brown, who's a Globe and Mail columnist and writer, or like a great journalist. And he, for some reason, asked me to go for coffee and tell him, like, he was thinking about writing commercial fiction. So he was like, can you tell me how to do it? And his, older man, sort of very precise way. And I was like, here's how you do it. Like you sit down and you write an outline and then like every day your chapter's just waiting for you and you just go and you plug it in. And he was like, Jesus Christ. That is
how many days?
That sounds like work. And I was like, oh my God. And it changed things for me because I thought it's super boring to do it that way. I know it's my job, but being a creative, I should be able to have fun sometimes. So I now allow myself to do it a little bit of fun. Just attempt to.
There's something to be said, particularly when you have a really, really exciting idea, is to just get as much of it out as to be in the moment. The author, and I'm the guy who wrote Remains of the Day, right?
Kazuo Ishiguro, I believe. Right. Yeah.
Well, he has that story about how he and his wife decided that he was going to write this draft in however many weeks, but he would do nothing but write. So his wife would bring him food and the kids were hurrying and like all this stuff. And he would and he found it joyful and he found the story richer because he could be in that world. And I think of how many times I'm writing and I stop myself because I'm like, oh, I've started 5 sentences in a row with he, she or whatever. And that is not joyful.
Yeah.
The opposite of joyful. So yeah. One of the things that
about Kazu, by the way, and I thought, I mean, that must be nice to have a wife who brings you. I want a wife. Like that made me want a wife, right? A wife. Me. Yeah.
It's true. So one of the other things that I really started to, and I had really had fun with your book, in the day drinking with authors, I've had such tremendous fun reading across so many genres. And you read a historical novel and you can kind of get swept up in all this research and just so like, oh my gosh, this is so admirable how much research you've done and how did you do this research? But then I'm reading your book and I was like, you had to research cons, the lottery. You had to research the 2008 financial crisis. You chose 2008 as one of your time periods. Casinos, like offshore money laundering. I mean, like there was a lot of research. So was it just a matter of like every day you were like, shit, what? Google, help me. Or did you find some sources to sort of help inspire and guide you?
Yeah. So before I dive in, I do some research. So I like to get some library holes. I'll go online and I found like Catch Me If You Can. And I read about Bernie Madoff, and I read a lot of books, about like how not to get scammed, for example, because I wanted to know I wanted to figure out how were people getting scammed? Like I really didn't know, aside from the stupid, like your Revenue Canada is after you call. Right. What are the scams out there? And so I started with that, and then, but so big picture stuff, like the big picture, and then all the finer details, those were when the TKs came in. And you're right, it was a lot. Like I was reading books about the financial crisis, and it was interesting that I chose that time period. And then I was like, whoa, there was some grifting going on here, like with like the banks. And that's kind of contributed to Lucky's dad being like, we're not so bad, right? Like people are bad. They're way worse than we are.
Is that why you picked 2008, or why, or did you want to have the first timeline in the 90s? Like, what was why 2008? And
yeah, because I wanted it to be around a financial crisis, because I wanted like there to be that certain vulnerability and people being somewhat ripe for the picking, and it just worked that way. But it's funny because often, not always, but I find that these little things will work. So I picked that, and then it just really worked for Lucky's dad's character. But I think, I really think I wanted there to be a financial crisis. Here's actually why, because I didn't want there to be social media. Back it up. That's why I picked that was my first
you. You were like, I'm just
wait a minute. No, I'm lying. I mean, it all worked, and I wanted there to be a financial crisis, but I really didn't want there to be social media, because if social media has introduced a whole other world of grifting and conning and scamming, and it just, to me, was too complicated. Like I think there's some mention, she looks up her friend on Facebook, but really, at that time, it wasn't like it is now. Mm-hmm. So right. I needed to not have to deal with that. But the research, you're right. It becomes, there's so many layers of research that have to be done. And like the lottery was a tough one. And very last minute copy editor catch was like, oh, by the way, she bought the lottery ticket in Las Vegas. And the copy editor said, you can't buy lottery tickets in Las Vegas, which is bananas. But they're like, nope, if you're gambling at the casino. So I had to have them go to Idaho and be at that gas station in Idaho. Like,
oh my God, that copy editor.
In Las Vegas.
You wouldn't even think to look that up.
No, but I looked up so many other things, and so many little details about the lottery, but somehow just never occurred to me.
Yeah,
Vegas.
Vegas. We're celebrating, this week was the Canadian release. Next week is the US release, or is it next month? I'm sorry.
No, not until December, actually. It's not coming. Things have been so weird, right? It's just been a weird year, and things are weird. So it's not coming out until December 7th in the US.
So December 7th, if you're a paperback reader, you can pick up this book, but you can buy it on,
you can get the
digitally, all your places. But
the
really exciting news is that this book has been optioned for television, and you are writing the pilot?
So I hope to be writing the pilot. So yeah, it was picked up by Disney, ABC Studios, ABC Disney Studios. I don't know what it's
That sounds legit. I mean, I feel like
called.
they might know what they're
One or
doing.
the other. It's like Penguin Random House, whatever. So that happened back in the summer. I was just able to announce it, which is amazing. The best thing about the option is the producer is Carlton Cuse. So Carlton he was a writer, showrunner, co-creator of Lost, Jack Ryan, Bates Motel. He's currently working on Lock and Key. And in the summer, I found out my agent, here in Toronto, was like, I don't know, some producer, Carlton something, is interested. And then she sent me his name, and I Googled him, and I was like, oh my God. And then my film agent said, well, I told him you're interested in screenwriting, which I absolutely am. And my last book, The Last Resort, was optioned. Tried to convince them to let me be the screenwriter, and they rightly so were like, you don't know anything about screenwriting, so probably not.
Nice try, kiddo.
It's okay. But Carlton said, well, let's have a Zoom call. And in his Wikipedia page, when you look him up, one of the first things it says about him is he's a known mentor of aspiring screenwriters. So like this has been the luckiest break of my career. So we get on the phone and on the Zoom call, and he's lovely. He's genuinely lovely. And he was very like, most people in Hollywood are like, oh my God, I've never read it. This is the best book I've ever read in my life. But he was like, hey, hi, I really like Lucky. I think we could probably do something with this. And I heard you maybe want to write. Like, I like, tell me a bit about why you want to do that. And I was like, well, I don't know what I said. But anyway, we ended up, they optioned it. And then immediately Carlton Cuse became, like, he's my mentor. So he came to Toronto in December to shoot Lock and Key, and we needed to get together. So we went for a walk in High Park, which was crazy because it was pandemic. We couldn't get together anywhere. And he's lovely. I gave him a CBC t-shirt, like a total dork. I was like, here, I have a present for you. And he's kind of a dork also. And he's really great. And he's exacting. We've been working on the same 10 pages for the past 6 months, the treatment essentially that we will be pitching to, because the studio is only the studio. Like we need to now get it
right
to something. So we'll be taking that pitch out, and then I hopefully will be writing the pilot. But at this point, I've had a master class from this incredibly wise, generous mentor who is so truly successful, but like really a good teacher. And honestly, one of those teachers who's like, well, you're going to have to do this, this, and this. And then I'm like, how? And he's like, you just have to go do that. Like make the ending more like the way we were. And I'm like, no problem. That's only the greatest moment in cinematic history. I can do that.
So has going through this process, has it changed the way you look at writing novels?
I don't know yet. Because I've been so busy with this, I can't even think about novels. I mean, I think that what it has done, I really wanted Lucky to be a TV show. I saw it that way. So it made me realize I was at least onto something because they saw it that way too. I don't know if it's changed because it is very different. Like it is very visual. And I honestly think like you can never write a novel that will ever be the same on screen because there just are so many changes that have to happen. But I think I've learned about story. And I think one of the things that Carlton is mildly obsessed with is Carrie being redeemable, which really bothered me at first, but now I get it. Like, and I think that's the thing. These characters have to be changeable. They have to be redeemable. Yeah. You can't, and look at like TV shows that go on and on. Somebody who's awful, like Michael from Melrose Place, he was the worst, right? But then didn't he end up good? Like everyone can redeem themselves in television. So.
And you need to start in a place where that can happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that is really exciting. That is really exciting. So, I mean, I guess I usually ask, what's next for you or what are you working on? Basically, you're slogging away on 10 pages.
I push the rock up the hill. It rolls back down the hill. Carlton will call me. He'll be like, I'm just driving down a desert highway. I'm the most interesting person in the world. Like I'm going to New Mexico with my wife. He doesn't say he's the most interesting person in the world, but he kind of is. And he's like, we just need a change of scene. And I'm sitting at my desk in the middle of a bloody nether lockdown. I'm like, yeah, me too. And then he's like, all right, that's 5, right? Here are my notes. I think we might be done. I don't want to jinx myself, but I think after 10 times, and he'll always say, this is fine. Even the most experienced writers have to do it this many times. Don't worry, you're not a failure. And then here are my notes, like throw the whole thing away. So I think we might be close to actually, I will go into these meetings and start reciting the pitch. So yeah, it's exciting. And I was wanting it to happen so badly, but like, then I won't be like chatting with Carlton. He won't call me from a desert highway.
Oh, there would be 1,000 desert highways. Don't. I mean, I feel like Hollywood is made out of desert highways. You are gonna be fine. Well, for those of you who haven't had a chance to pick this book up, I mean, clearly you need to. Like, it is cinematic. It is like it does. It reads. It's like it's one of those books. Particularly, I was reading it sort of sensitively to this as I'm in a process where I'm like, why do I have all these words? I'm like, there's so many words, and it is just a shot. It is just a shot.
Yeah.
So I fully recommend this book. It's so much fun. Marissa, thank you so much for coming by and answering some questions. I can't wait to hear what happens with the TV show. This is really, really cool. For everybody out there, stay safe. Get the shot, wear a mask, have a drink, and read a book. Good night, guys.
Nice. Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you, everyone. Just gonna take a picture.
Oh.